You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston, your home for uncensored news and underground music since 2011.
I got this one, and it might not really count as local, but this inflation in Houston. You know, we talk a lot about inflation, and we have for the whole life of this show, but we rarely really link it to Houston other than the Dallas branch of the Fed being there. So it turns out that Houston's basically got higher inflation, and what it suggests, basically, than the rest of the country. It suggests that demand is stronger and supply chain issues, labor shortages might be worse here than other cities. At least that's according to Patrick Jankowski, who's the SVP of research at Greater Houston Partnership. It continues to be higher than the national average and has been so for the past 5 months. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, says that it is 9.5% over past year. So, you know, we had inflation last year too, right? So now it's 9.5% over that. So just thought I'd bring that up, let y'all know that Houston's standing out again.
So, I mean, and this is the kind of hidden tax that people like Ron Paul have been warning about for years, right? Like this type of inflation, but hitting people on a local level.
Totally.
At a higher rate than other places.
Yes. You know, and what I like, we've got an article to get into later in the show, I believe, that actually, and maybe we should just get into it now, that actually spells out, you know, it doesn't go into the mechanism as we've discussed before on this show, but it also spells it out in maybe sort of layman's terms. And if that's, I mean, it's a national, and if you don't have any local that's pressing, then I'm fine with just transitioning to this Federal Reserve story.
Go for it.
The argument is that and this is the thing about it, right? These I guess authoritarian or statist or, you know, solutions from on high, I don't know what you want to call it, but these, you know, one size fits all mandates, I don't know, ideas that are sold, you know, with the rhetoric of how much good they can do if they were just benevolent and use their control of everything for good. But, you know, this isn't always what happens. The Federal Reserve is now engaged in a concerted program to increase unemployment. Yes, that's right, to increase unemployment from its current rate of 3.5%. And, you know, we've already talked about that for the last couple of years, about the Bureau of Labor Statistics even changing their own numbers to strip U.S. workers, you know, the average person, of small gains in bargaining power that they may have achieved in the aftermath of the COVID economic lockdown. Jerome Powell, the boss of the private central bank, acknowledged this clearly, if demurely, in a major speech where he predicted that there would be very likely some softening of labor market conditions resulting from current Fed policy. The Fed is advancing this program in order to bring down higher inflation rate that has emerged in the past year. As the most recent August figures announced, average prices for consumers measured by CPI rose by 8.3% relative to a year ago. That's like average for the rest of the nation. If you're in Houston, it's 9.5, though somewhat lower than the 9.1% peak for June. And nonetheless, this is still higher than at any point in the last 40 years. The Fed is attacking workers' bargaining power because, as of the most recent June figures, average wages rose by 5.1% relative to the previous year. The Fed, along with mainstream economists, assume that businesses will raise their prices to cover these wage increases, so that wage increases automatically drive inflation. But this does not necessarily follow. At least in part, businesses could absorb higher wages either through increasing productivity of their operations or by accepting somewhat lower profits. In fact, businesses have been raising prices faster than wages have gone up, so that profits have kept rising in the post-lockdown recovery. Meanwhile, for average workers, their 5.1% wage increase is 3.2 percentage points below the 8.3 rise in overall prices. Basically, this amounts to a 3.2% pay cut in terms of what you can buy with your wage. And that's your hidden tax right there. That's
so this is like what this article is pointing out is the specific recent action by the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank, and it's saying that is equating to what they just said there, a 3.2% pay cut in terms of what workers can buy, right? And then that's on top of what this previous article was showing about Houston's inflation rate being higher than the national average.
Houston's story there is just kind of like a little snapshot, of the effect of these policies. And there's much more in that story. It talks about inflation in the 70s and the early 80s, where it was 9% and 13.6% in 1980. I mean, that's phenomenal. And we look at some of these, we see an old movie or something, and we wonder how someone bought a tank of gas for 25 cents. But, and we see and we say, oh my God, how did they live on so many few dollars? And we don't understand that their buying power was stronger, that it took, a 3/4 of an ounce of silver was only $1. Now an ounce of silver is pushing 25 on the street, and that's at a really low price. So, I think it's basically the problem with what you would call a fiat or a chit, like company chit economy, where you're basically just given a ghost of money, a symbol of buying power. And you can go out there, but it's perpetually losing power. You have to trade it for something that's not going to lose buying power. So I would recommend this story. It is interesting, and it does.
Micah, I'm not sure if my last question came across, so I'll just ask again briefly. So was it like, if I understood it correctly, like what this article is pointing out, the Nation one, about this action taken by the Fed and how that equates to essentially equates to a 3.2% pay cut for the worker and what they can actually buy, right? And then the article we had before that is talking about inflation in Houston being higher than the average, the national average. So those two things kind of together, right? Like these are working together against.
So honestly, in Houston, we're losing even more of our buying power.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I was trying to. So that's pretty crazy.
It's like losing a nickel out of every dollar almost. It's to that point, and that's just over last year. That's how fast it's starting to happen. What do they say? Slowly at first, and then sudden. But I'd like to go on a little bit, because it does point out some other. We did just speak briefly, and I skipped ahead to the other big difference between the early 80s and the present is the relative conditions faced by the working class. Average real wages in the U.S. after controlling for inflation had risen to nearly 50% between 1960 and 72, just prior to the big first 73 oil price spike. And so what happened in 70? It got decoupled from gold. In 64, decoupled from silver. In 72, the average non-supervisory worker earned $25.28 per hour adjusted for inflation. You know what I'm saying? Well, as of 2021, the average worker earns $25.18. Do the math. We lost a dime. This is a time when labor productivity, wasn't that the point of all this ingenuity, was higher productivity? The average amount of each a worker is able to produce over the course of the day has increased by nearly 250% between 72 and 21. So we've made 250% more to basically get a dime less in buying power. Yep, the average worker. If between 72 and today, average wages have risen in step with productivity gains and not a penny more, the average worker's hourly wage in 2021 would have been $61.94, not $25.18. So think about that. So if it had been just grown at the same rate. So it's real important. The inflation rate, so you can demand your value if you're trading time or even your product, the product of your time for Federal Reserve notes or trading Federal Reserve notes for something else. So the idea.
How do you think?
Yep.
How do you think an employer would respond if somebody went in there, say an average hourly worker, and said, hey, you know what, I've been doing the math and I did my research, and if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve, I would be making $61.94 an hour. So I'd like what I'm actually worth.
I tell them this: if I was their employer, all that's true, yo. Here's how much we make, and you keep doing a good job, and I can get another new car next year. No. No, but you can show people, there's lots of different ways to show them. And I do think, it's about giving them a maybe not everybody a share of the profits but people who have put in their time a share of the profits, maybe the boss and the people who own the machine of the establishment there are making a little bit more. But if you've been a good helper and you've been able to help them make more money, then why wouldn't they want you to earn more money? And if they don't want you to earn more money, why would you want to work for such a caricature? Is that your real only opportunity to earn your bread? I am sorry for those that have to say yes, but I'd love to believe that you just haven't found a different solution. I believe that there's many other opportunities than working for such sort of despots.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you doing those two stories, Micah, not only because it sort of checked off a box of talking about some local Houston news, which is always good when we can do that, but tying into the more perennial issue of inflation, especially in terms of, I was just talking with a friend yesterday just about realizing how much more the trip that I make, that I've made now a dozen times or so over the last 2 years, from Morelia down here in central Mexico to Houston, which is a 2-day trip, and just how in the last 2 years I've seen it become more and more expensive pretty quickly, or just a couple of jumps over the last year, especially that trip because of gas costs on both sides of the border, and other associated costs, just food and things like that, hotels and Airbnbs, all those things sort of rising in prices. And I think that this is something that's affecting plenty of people in different ways.
Yeah, I do too. I think people are becoming aware of it. I had a individual that I talk to probably on a weekly basis just say a change that they had made was they had become increasingly aware of wasting, like wasting food, of buying more than they needed. And I thought that was, interesting, because they didn't mean to actually be speaking about the economic impact, but that's what they were doing. They're like, they started to realize how much money they were throwing away. So, I mean, yeah, if you got to buy extra food that's non-perishable, that makes sense. But, nobody wants to have their food perish. I mean, that's just waste. And I thought it was interesting. So I've seen all kinds of instances of this. There's this oil, and I guess, like you get for your car, motor oil. It used to be 99 cents, $1.09, this one brand forever. I was at Fiesta, of all places, and the price was $6. It might have been $5.91 or $6.91. I don't remember. It was so bad I took a picture of it. Then in my feed, someone was talking about how they went to get a whole bunch of building materials and how much that was. And so I just dropped this picture in there, and they were all like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. A quart of oil, not even any of the good brands, was, more than halfway to $10.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear people talking about it. I just shared a question for those who are watching the live stream, and wherever you're watching, if you want to go to the HoustonFreethinkers.com, you're always welcome to contact us there and share your stories with us. We want to hear, are you experiencing inflation where you live? We have Houston listeners, but we also have listeners from all around the world. So we'd love to hear your stories. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.